Now, today, actually, I'm going to sort of explain the text. 네, 라는 소등으로 봐. 라는 소등.
변두 주디 선대
가.
선대 변두 주디.
변두 주디.
나.
No. No, I don't think necessary. So the text wrote by one famous Tibetan master. The German economy 믿어 찍으는 그들이다.
중이 조금 제름시 조금 주시.
I think 13th century, maybe 13th, 14th century. We always pay more attention about the text itself, not much pay attention to what happened. So we very much ignorant. So that at that time, quite a well-known Bodhisattva, great practitioner of Bodhichitta. And also good scholar as well. I saw some of his writing. Wonderful, very good. Now the content,
the subject matter.
Is
the subject matter.
The subject matter is mainly altruism, infinite altruism. Now I would like to explain something. Of course, including insects, we all want happy life. And do not want suffering. Usually, I think animals and also we human beings, in modern time, education highly developed and the scientific research also highly developed. However, still, you see, I think science, external thing, highly developed, but science about mind, not yet developed fully or satisfactorily. As yesterday I mentioned. So usually, I think yesterday also I mentioned, usually we simply sort of concern more about sensorial level of experiences. So that's why it's a material sort of things, you see, some direct link, some nice things, nice house, nice furniture. And then, of course, the air condition, these things, is to provide physical sort of comfort, nice color, nice sort of shape, these things, comfort, give comfort, eye consciousness, and music, ear, and good smell, I like that, and food, and clothes for physical. So those sort of some kind of satisfaction which come from sensorial level experiences is very short. And sensorial level of sort of joyfulness or pleasant cannot subdue mental level of worry or stress or pain. Other hand, if you see the person have some ability to develop mental peace, not through sensorial experiences, but through mental level, then that firstly long lasting. Secondly, very, very powerful. So mental level of peace or satisfaction can subdue physical level difficulties or sensorial level because of the problems. So now mental level, key things. Too much self-centered attitude. Automatically, once think oneself, then you can't see the wider perspective. Just me, like that. So then, that really, you see, creates a lot of problem. I think yesterday also I mentioned. So it seems to me all major religious tradition is recognize that. So now, for example, the concept of God, Creator, also you see immense help to reduce self-centered arrogance. We are nothing but creature of God. So it's more because of the stress, Creator, God as a creator, that automatically reduce self-centered because the arrogance is I think two ways. One way, simply you see the single faith towards God, reduce that. And secondly, the God considered as an infinite love. So more close feeling with God, you see, you naturally, follow or practice or consider importance of love, right? Like that. So that's one thing. Now, Buddhist tradition, Buddhist practice, the faith towards God, towards Buddha, Dharma, Buddha, similar sort of because of the
effect.
Similar sort of effect. But then Buddha considered as a teacher, not a real protector. Buddha himself, you see, told his follower, you are your own master. Everything depends on yourself. Buddha's work is show the path. So main responsibility is on your own shoulder. So, what do you think? Buddha a little bit selfish? Or blame put on practitioner's shoulder? He never say your future as in my hand. He never said that. If you praise to me, if you worship me, you get everything. He never said that. So only through your own training of mind, your own practice. So he said, you are your own master. So
you are your own master. So the Buddha has said that you are your own master, who else will be your master?
So then the Dharma become very important. So Dharma is the real protector. Dharma consider medicine. Buddha consider doctor. Doctor is he cannot cure, just a meeting doctor, only medicine. So Buddha like doctor or teacher. His teaching dharma is the medicine. Teaching the lungatempa to topetapani.
Yes. So within the teaching, we can categorize those of the scriptural or the spoken teachings, and then also the realizations, the experiences that you develop.
Lungatempa topetapa.
No.
Lungatempa to topetapani.
Yes.
So lungatempa is tenesumde lungatempa. Shesho.
So scriptural teachings comprise the three baskets, the three collections of teachings. And then the realizational teachings comprise the three trainings.
Lavasum, which now tomorrow. Takamdir, Hakwa lavasums. Dame Tawa the dream is Hakwa lavasums.
So with regard to these three trainings, they are common to both the Buddhist and non-Buddhist traditions.
All, I think, Indian traditions, same.
All the Indian religious traditions, these are all common. Whereas now when it comes within the context of the practice of doing these three practices, within the understanding of selflessness, anatma theory, then it becomes higher trainings.
Mm-hmm. So then,
scriptural teachings.
That's the prescription.
So the scriptural teachings are like giving prescription.
The real medicine, the
Yes. And then the realizations that you develop through these teachings become the actual the realizational teachings.
So once we develop awareness, I think I may say it this way. The way Buddha, you see, explained Four Noble Truths, actually, when he taught Tenshi Ngol Devas, then Tenshi Chawar Devas, then Chawar Devud Chawar Devas, Devasum. Dig Kartambarislavna, Tenshi Ngol Devas, she needs Moy needs. Did Langdor Kishke Mabche. Then Tenshi Chawar Devas loved Langdor Kishke. Then Chawan Devud Chawar Devas loved Devud.
So so when the Buddha gave his teaching in the first sermon and the teaching on the Four Noble Truths, actually the Four Noble Truths were taught in three sets. First, the Buddha taught about the actual nature of the Four Noble Truths. So this has nothing to do with moral issues as such.
He's not nature of Four Noble Truths, not that way. I think nature of suffering and because of the
origin,
permanent sort of happiness. So then, when explain these two things, again, no creator or humiliation, humiliation. Here, Arya Asanga mentioned Yomebe Jen, Midabe Jen, Nube Jen Sum Shidwa.
So since pain and pleasure are not, do not come without causes, therefore, Arya Asanga has actually given these three types of causes or conditions, which are called the unwavering condition, and then impermanent changing condition, and then the potential condition.
The dolya tidwa any diebe diju dikebe diki kang maribu yana en dushi sesungshada dungen dushi le just.
And so in a sutra, it is mentioned, it is said that if when this exists, that arises, and then that also comes, and then when this arises, that also arises, and therefore, when there is ignorance, then there is suffering.
So these are just explain the reality.
And therefore, within this context, what the Buddha has taught is the reality of how things are.
So, they basically, you see, Buddha state, suffering and pleasure, you see, come. The
Yes. So pain and pleasure do not come without causes.
Any
and so these pain and pleasure, these experiences do not come from some kind of unchanging permanent cause.
That the tangzimbe so juberisa so takpat dugorwa so takpat dugorwa chasanga takbe dure chumaris.
And so what this counters is the belief or the philosophical assertion of the Sankhya school of philosophy, where they say And so the Sankhya school actually presents the whole of the thesis or philosophical philosophy within the rubric of what are called the 25 different objects. And so the rest of the objects come from what is known as the pradhan, the primal factor, and then what comes from this primal factor is actually enjoyed by or utilized by what is known as a conscious being.
Tatene midakbekens suduzane otangel disha ta di shugde yo mebekens ati yo sadi jigden kobobo 딱바랑 기 기부 로이요 뭔도 저타네 중에 말이스 단지 그 법이 가서 그러다 디가용이요.
Then when Master Asanga mentions the unwavering condition, what he's actually countering is the belief that there is some kind of a being, like a creator, Ishvara, or something which is permanent and self-evolved without going through processes of enlightenment or anything. And then also it is because of the will of that kind of Ishvara or God, things come. And such an idea is countered by this understanding of things coming from these unwavering conditions.
디케벤 디케 사티기 디두 중견디 디두 제법 디두 가서다 디두 팬 도지 kho라 교회 정신 미다버지고 그랬어. 디두디 교회 정신을 봐. 디디에서는 대부 미다버지 미다버 정신 미두잖아요. 디케지 교디에 미다버 정신 kho라스. 저상가 디케벤 디케 사티. 교 kho라 땡기왕 중대
And then And then the second condition that Arya Asanga mentions is the impermanent condition. And so here, in relation to this, the sutra, where it says that because this arises, therefore that also arises. What this shows is that our pain and pleasure, of course, are the results of something that has given rise to them. And therefore, these experiences that we have, the pain and pleasure, are something which is called impermanent, changing all the time. And so, therefore, what called in the sutra, when it says, because this arises, that arises, what is actually shown or taught is that the results do not come from something which is a permanent cause, but because the result also changes, and therefore it must come through a changing and impermanent cause as well.
Then 뉴베겐스 동행이 주인나 대두고 주 가인에 코라 제부도 제스트 붙이기 다 데부 가서 그래 남줄 컨디션에 디 계약이 누베이 가지고 그래서 근데 뉴베겐스 근데 인도 동행 수직이 누가 말아 동행 수직이 누구야 말할 때 동행이 주 용기 알아 다다 동행이 주 쏴야 돼 미시바 막 좋아해서 다다 머리가 왕기 동행이 주 놓쳐봐 사지 나는 때려가 주니까 마침 그래.
And then the third condition that Master Asanga mentions is the potential condition, which shows that called our pain and pleasure, because they come through causes and conditions, and therefore those the results that arise from causes and conditions must be given rise to by some kind of cause condition which are compatible to those results, and something which is not compatible to the to give rise to those effects will not be able to do so. And so therefore, since nobody wants pain and suffering, but because we suffer, what has to be understood is that, as the Buddha mentions in the sutra, and therefore through ignorance comes suffering.
I mean, nobody or no sentient being is want suffering, but cause of suffering is their own creation. So why ignorance? So the according to Buddha Dharma, the cause of suffering is ignorance. So then the tension challenge so now the cosmic love sarimba, Dunga Damba, Kunju Damba, Gokwe Damba, Lamjitaba Kasu Robs Lavimba. 머리부터 세트야 이거 있잖아요. 거기다 봐. 레송한 것이. 자, 따디기 대신 뭘 대봤으니. 디도 주드제베 나다디 마수. 다 나다디 리집에 있는잖아. 당아서 동해면 되버다 대한데 인상 다 랑도 같이 셔서는 동해 시에버자. 군주 빵을자. 고봉원도자. 람kom버자.
And then in the second, during the first sermon, the second set of the teaching on the Four Noble Truths, in that what the Buddha is actually showing is, and since in the first set, what is showed is, as we talked about yesterday, that there is suffering, and then the suffering has its origin, and then called like ignorance and karma and so forth, and the destructive emotions and so forth. And then there is also a possibility to cease or to stop these suffering and the causes. And so yesterday we talked about how we can attain or achieve the true cessation within ourselves by uprooting the ignorance that is within ourselves. And so in this way, what the Buddha after having taught about the suffering, then the origin of suffering, the cessation, and then the path, next what he mentions is how to go about with the practice of overcoming, and through which to overcome our suffering and gain experience of happiness. And therefore he mentions that the suffering has to be understood, and then the origin of suffering must be eliminated or overcome, and then the cessation should be actualized, and then the path should be cultivated.
다 대대비 아니 랑도 제베이나 드부지 두야 요르베스lam나 다 드부야 메네 랑도 제네 그렇게면 봐. 맞다? 랑도 베지션 거게야만 다 드부 요르스. 다디 자와 있는 머리가 좋아인도잖아요. 다 가다 있네. 동네기 주 머리가 친지로고 로디 친지 말고 로 깨베고네. 아니 친지로고 로 세도리스. 진짜 인도잖아요. 동네 줄치고 동네 주 깎고네. 동네 산르잖아요. 라르 동네 쉐브르샤야. 대신도 근중 라르 빵어차. 빵 심비젤라 라르 빵어차. 오봉고도 제스비젤라 라르 건도 차야. 람라니 롱건도 주스비젤라 라르 있는 건도 줘야지. 다 매버지 간다. 제 그게 빵부터 똑바 탈치면 내가 몰라 달라르 빵야 식다 라르 병원도 쳐야지 이거 말이지 저런 저부시도 대대 첩지 디기 야 대신 남샤디 타녀 병원도 쳐니 요리스 다 동네 담바로 쏘고디 전 담배 병원도 쳐니 요리 담바리 주버시 요리스는 요 말이지 산다 동네 타녀도 동네 시험을 찾고 그러지 이제 딱좀 짠 입에 동해지 요 말이스. 사실은 인도 동해 시험을 잘 매스. 양디 전담 대바로 봐. 야 자장 찍기 하래.
And then here, once the Buddha has taught that how to go about with overcoming suffering and attaining happiness. Of course, once you apply the teachings within oneself, if there is no way that you can actually overcome suffering and attain the result, which is the true cessation and so forth, then of course there's no need for the Buddha to teach about overcoming suffering and its causes, knowing suffering and overcoming its causes and attaining cessation and so forth. But because there is a possibility for us to overcome ignorance, because ignorance is the root of our suffering, and ignorance itself is a misconception which sees or views things, something which is not real or something which is unreal there, and therefore it is a distorted state of mind. Therefore, there is an antidote to it, and therefore, once you apply the antidote within yourself to overcome the ignorance, then that also puts an end to the suffering. And therefore, once you have eliminated and uprooted or overcome suffering completely, then what happens is you reach a stage where you do not have to overcome or apply yourself to overcome suffering anymore. And therefore, although during the second set of the teaching, the Buddha says no, that there is suffering, and that the origin of suffering must be overcome and so forth. But then during the third set of this teaching on the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha has said that he refers it with reference to the result. He says the suffering must be known, but there is nothing to be known. So what he meant by that is that although in the conventional sense there is suffering, and there is origin of suffering, and therefore to overcome.
다 대시 군제도 송버봐. 대시 군제도 송인도 전에 저부 줄을 떼버지. 단소아. 다 저부 줄을 떼버지 rebu gyulu teba tawati, ta tawati, gyunze tenjung tawati che. Ta rebu gyulu rāleba, rebu gyulu ya tebe, tenregi ta tūtūp, gyunze tenjung tūtūp, di kwa le yundu zane, ta digi, 어제 당연 처음도. 다 디기 다 더동파 14로 상담이나 다 딩을 뒤지려고 본다. 다 균제부지 사들라 다 저부지와로 뭔도 쳐봤다. 중 각발로 뭔도 쳐봐. 자원이부터 뒤녀도 좋고요. 저 두동아 시절로 가지 되고요. 자 두 각발로 뭔도 쳐봤다. 저부지와로 뭔도 쳐봐. 자원이부터 뒤념체. 다 저부 그래서 중 각발로 뭔도 쳐봐. 내가 올라 저부 깨워로 뭔도 쳐고 자와 열이 자와디 때 저부디 안돼 요 말이 제상가 지 가서 보게 깨워로 뭔도 쳐고 자외 때 저부디 다다 좀 해보세 어느다 심매베다 아니 캐시매베 캐주소 차송아 봐 다 캐시매베 캐주소지 디샤요 디 딘지 인두자네 다 저부디 다다 줘야 말이지 중주를 삼네 중주는 저불을 삼네 저부 깨워로 것도 쳐 자와도 샤도도 자 디디 인두자네 다 간다지 그게 저부 랑생기 두버지 뭐이나 저부다 데뷔 캐주 깨워로 것도 쳐봐 자원이부터 가서 그게 캐시 캐주 전에 그 원이 두버이나 그 균형도 역과로 딱 중주를 삼네 딱 샤샤지 딱때 딱 배운 게 봐도 뭐도 그게 저부 깨워로 것도 쳐봐 자와대 강도 댄세 저부터 딱 주잖아 다른 매봐 죄송합니다. 저 딘지 인두산에 다 강다 지 대국호 죽호라 팬 독지식도 와 깨지식도 와 깨불 채봐 보셔야 돼 깨지식도 떠있는 깨불 채봐 보셔고 마도 깨져 매나 깨지 샤신 말아 다가는 신기 깨져 대우디 주변에 걸라 깨진 가사로 레디 깨진 대우유도 깨지 규미 깨지 규유도 깨진 대우야 말이 그 크도데 깨지스 놓쳐야 한다 봐. 딱고 지 중중그 대우를 떠네 깨지. 말 대신에 그 줄을 깨지를 떠네 깨자. 팬 닥자 팬 독지. 구도 고소마 지글랍다. 자 딘데 인도산에 다데 동네 셔버셔네. 동네 템바시 균제 템바시 den시 균제지 요래데 딱도 잖아. 요 말이지. 어다 저부 줄을 때에 den중성도 마세. 주 저부를 때에 때는 딱be den중. 따뜻이야 연결해. 다만 때는 딱be 그 때는 중에 den중인데 좀더 시간을 하거든 되게 하래. den시 토마스메 그돌다 균제 den중도 송송아. 다디 샴데 균제 den중도 마도 14가 맞지 뭐이나 아니 저부디 줄을 때 가서 주디에 저불을 때에 때는 딱 봐서 den중 고아들 내윤도 다 모님 가서다 모님에 봤던데 또 시진기 슝기 저자때 맞아 대응도 왔네 콜로 당벽거리야 콜로 바로 시진기 슝 대야기 시르부터 되는 땡도 같네 저다 다주 로번 까말시리 사진 저변나리야 뒤도아 균제 den중 시베관에 뭐도 주야 때는 딱그 den중 시베관에 아니 좋지 내려 주야 뒤송도
I'm sorry. And so
I think I should say sorry. Too long maybe.
I would like to say I would apologize if I leave anything out, and I seek help from Geshe-la and others also. So when it comes to the third set of the teaching on the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha has taught that the suffering should be known, but there's nothing to be known, and then the origin of suffering should be eliminated or overcome, but there's nothing to be overcome, and then cessation should be actualized, but there's nothing to be actualized, and then the path should be cultivated, but there's nothing to be cultivated, right? And so here what the Buddha is actually teaching is, of course, on the conventional level, we can understand that there is suffering and the origin of suffering, and then there is also true cessation, which is the elimination of all the causes of suffering, and then the path leading to that goal. But then what is being said is that in the ultimate sense, when you, for example, in the case of the relationship between cause and effect, of course, when we talk about causality, which is taught in the second set of the teaching on the Four Noble Truths, and the first one also, what is called what we have to understand is that the cause gives rise to its effect, and then we can understand that an effect comes from its cause, and so from that, within the context of the law of causality, what we can understand is that everything that is called a result must come from its cause, and therefore it is dependent on the cause. And so having understood that a result comes from its cause, now the fact that a result is, a cause gives rise to its effect.
Now that reality, now further investigate, analyze, then not only result depend on cause, but cause also depend on result. Now that.
And so the cause also is dependent on its result that it gives rise to. And so when we talk about this relationship between a cause and an effect, what we should also understand is that there is a moment, a period of called transition from the level of the cause, from the cause to the effect. And so when a cause is about to cease, a result is about to arise. And so within that, during that period of transition, what we can see is that the result is about to arise. But then, so when that happens, although the result is not yet there, but because there is a cause which is about to cease and which is about to give rise to its effect, because of the future effect that is going to arise from the cause, we can say we talk about a result being produced. And so whereas if you really do an analysis into what that result is, or where the result is, it's as if when we say a result is about to, a result is given rise to, when we say that a result is about to arise, although the result is not yet there, it's like there is no basis for the designation of that label. But then we still give that characteristic of arisal of a result as well. And then although therefore the result is not yet produced, it's yet it's to be going to arise in the future, we can still say that there is a time when the result is about to arise. And so in this, what we understand is that when a cause is about to give rise to its result and the result is about to arise, although we can talk about in the conventional terms the result arising, a result is about to arise and so forth, there is a result that is going to arise in the future and so forth. But then what we need to understand is that there is no objectively existing result or cause as such. And so in this way, this is like doing an ultimate analysis into the cause and the result. And therefore, in relation to a cause, which is defined as that which gives rise to a result, or that which helps a result to arise. We should understand that that cause is given the label of being a cause in relation to the effect that it's going to bring about. And so and then once the result is produced, the cause is no more there. But then we can still talk about the cause having given rise to the result. And so in this way, we can see that not only the result is dependent on its cause, but the cause is also designated in relation to the effect that the effect it gives rise to. And so the cause and the result become mutually dependent in this way. And therefore, the causal dependency of things that causes give rise to result is something. So within the dependency here, we understand that there is a causal dependence of things, and which is to say the karmic causal causes and conditions giving rise to their effects, and therefore we have the causal dependency of things, which is asserted commonly by all the four philosophical schools within Buddhism. Whereas now, in regards to how a cause is ultimately related or dependent on its effect, and that there is no effect or no cause which is not posited in without being related to its cause. What we understand. Its result. What we understand from there is that there is no cause which is independently or objectively existent, and therefore that rejection of an objective existence of a cause, but the fact that there is a cause because of its result is something is understood in terms of how a cause is dependently designated in relation to its cause. And so this is what is taught. I mean, this is what is taught here within the context of the Four Noble Truths by the Buddha is like laying the basis or the foundation for what comes later in the teaching on of the Prajnaparamita Sutras, where the Buddha teaches that there is nothing which inherently exists, objectively exists. And so having said that, then Master Kamala Shila also mentions that through the understanding of the law of causality, what we can actually do is to create the causes for a higher rebirth. And then through understanding of the dependency in terms of how things are designated and labeled, we can lead ourselves by cultivating the causes for the enlightenment or definite goodness, as it's called.
So usually, you see, it's well known, children or son come from father. Yes, no argument. Now go more precise. Till son because of exist. The person not yet father. As soon as son develop, then that person become father. So son already did because of the exist. So when son is there, the person not yet father. When the person become father, son already developed. So from that viewpoint, son not come from father. Isn't it? 파유도 부메, 부유도 파메. 부팔레 중슬로시 말어. 거스메.
So
부마차봐도 파처가 말어. For example, nobody call me father because no son, no children. So 이네 파유도 그래서 붙게니 파차로. 그래서 부팔레 중 말어.
And so here, when someone is called a father, it means that the person has a child, and therefore, without a child, the person is not called a father as such. But then here what we should understand is that when the person who actually sows the seed for the son is not yet there. Whereas when the son is born, the father or the producer of that
the
son...
born mother.
No.
The concept.
Conceived. And so when the
otherwise
when the child
we can
is
say
perceived,
during his child there, then we or the father. So the kasa.
No.
Me mirchak was lord. The mirchak when nego modu konro.
So sorry. When a child is conceived in the mother's womb,
소주가 파바시잖아. 매 mirchak was 시도. 그래서 내도 닝스 잘못하고 nego the mirchak 봐.
And so in the sutras, there's mention of in relation to conception of a child, there is a period when the person when the child is not yet a human as such, but then is in the process of becoming a human, and then there is a time when the child is a human. And so that is mentioned. And so we are here talking about the conception period. And so when the seed for that child, the child to be conceived, is sowed, I mean, the conception is not yet there. And when the conception happens, the person who has actually sowed that seed or given rise to that conception has ceased. And so in this way, within this context, we can say when the father is there, the child or the conception is not yet happened, but when the conception happens, the father or the producer has ceased, is no more there.
말해.
No.
No, I think there's something wrong.
파유도 품에서.
가.
파유도 품에, 부유도 품에서.
Till conception take place, the person not yet father. So as soon as conception take place, then that person become father. So now, strictly speaking, the conception not come from father. Clear now? Clear? Oh, like that. Before conception take place, that person not yet father. Only after conception take place. So then that person become father. So that means the conception not take place due to father. No father there at that time. Now, similarly, chebapo, chawa, chawe yu, di chawa lo tuene chebapo lo tuene chawa, chawa lo tuene yu, dukshaangdo. 그 chebapo보다 만들의 chawa yamarwa. 다른 것이 chawa다 만들의 chebapo 민도가. 다 chawe 사실 레슨 써야 돼. tuene 샤야지마도 그게 랑서부 샤야면도.
And so this reasoning also applies to the action, the agent, or the agent, and then the object on which the action is taken place. And so these three things, the action, the agent, and the object of action, are also should be understood to be related to one another. So without there being an action, you cannot talk about an actor as such. And so similarly, without there being an action, you cannot talk about an object on which the action is taking place. And so similarly, an agent cannot be posited without an action and an object of action.
So these now this is shows things are relative, no independent. Without investigation, yes, we can say this is this, this is that. If we further investigate, we can't find. 자상나주 우메숑나로 덤대비 윤디 마다나 냠가 땅나 시스차와.
So in the Madhyamaka treatises, there is it's mentioned that when we don't do any kind of analysis or investigation into things,
진주나 용어요. 말이 우무주고 나래요. 그래. 마다 잡고 띠물래이 노사 직. 당연히 진주나한테 가서 얘기하다. 마다 맞아병 안에 나 타녀도 작성직 안에 요주마다 당전 전이 예 때네요. 지도자네 마다 맞아가네 샤야디 타녀 구조된 거스. 당시 제니 그 직주든지 데 당전 제니 딱고 니대 지도자네 라 타녀 잠그 못침 버. 그 당전 제니 니가 지도자네 단담된 봐. 다 다들 전에 니스야 가르스라나 간다 다들 전에 타 강도야 못 주고 찍다 니가도 저 니주스도 니주지 여기 있잖아고 로이 유도 주대로 로 가야로 지기 유도 주대로 타녀별로 유도 주보다 말해 돼 터도 저지기 릭시기 니든 봐 그다 마다 가서 타녀 삼게 못침 버 그렇게 인루 쩨 로띠기 니든 봐 자, 니하시도 가. 자가 단돈 봐. 로 관계 주면 해야지. 나한테 로 탐해봐. 지기다 르유레 거다 가서 르라를 대대는지. 봐. 사고도에 단단 무슨 등에 등에기 강사기 냠용 근데 중요 봐. 디 냠용 너신지 나한테 돈이 뭐도 모종이 미 돈이 무슨 노마도 미 애니 독배 상도 매봤다. 제 주도 매봤지는 마삼 재미 시셔야 됨버리. 자상양 아주 개방 거시기 단담담바 로유 모인선. 배나도 준주기 단담 로유 주민 세대한 독신은 지루지도 봐.
So in the Madhyamaka treatises, it's said that when we don't do any kind of analysis or investigation into the nature of the things, then of course it's easy to we can easily accept the conventional things. Whereas when we do this kind of analysis into the nature of things, then of course nothing can be really founded. And so in this way, what is understood is that things do conventionally exist. Whereas when you do ultimate analysis or into the nature of things, then nothing can be founded. And so this is what is clearly mentioned also in Bodhisattva Charya Avatara by Master Shantideva, where he says that things are merely conventionally existent through renown, and whereas when you do this ultimate analysis into things, nothing can be found at all. And so when we say this thing exists, that thing exists, and so forth, we are referring to these things in conventional terms. Whereas now, without being... No.
가서 직전 작별권에 여기 있어. 지금 가서
직전 작별권 좀 말아주세요.
딩 말하면 딩 못 가서 지금 상당한데 지금 다 되어서 또 참말로 짜는 이야 요 말도 있네. 직전 작별권에 딩 못 가서 지금 직전 작별 딩
직전 작별
본번 넘버를 마다 나서 창원 주신다. 건신 나서 찾았는데 그다음은 그런 가서 야, that's it.
마다 지고 님은 레이는 세 단지 손에 따라 마다
오무주고 쓰는 왜?
나
오무주고 쓰는 거. 저상 오무주고 시작.
And so in also in the in Master Chandrakirti's Madhyamaka Avatara, he says that all these conventionality of things can be accepted in terms of worldly convention, where we do not do any kind of ultimate analysis into the nature of things.
대놈신데 남자집에 남도유와 만신, 달래 현도 주고 직전 작별권에 여기 어떻지?
And then Master Chandrakirti also says in the same text that, of course, a chariot is not posited through what is known as the sevenfold reasoning or investigation into the nature of the chariot, but then by resorting to the worldly conventions, we posit a chariot. And so in this way, what we can understand is that there are these
these two root text Abhisamaya Alankara almost and then Madhyamaka Avatara it's compulsory memorize. So I myself also, you see, since childhood, you see, they memorize these two texts. Then you see, without any sort of the understanding, just you see, learn by heart.
Yes. So in And so, in connection with these two classic texts, so in connection with these two texts, Abhisamaya Alankara, which is a very terse text written by Maitreya, and Madhyamaka Avatara by Master Chandrakirti, when the monk students memorize these two texts, the first one is so difficult to commit to one's memory that it gives them a lot of hardship, and therefore because of that they also the monks have to work so hard that they even get what do you call lice and kind of those bugs on their body, hair, and so forth. And so it's the text Abhisamaya Alamkara is known as the ornament for clear realization. And so this ornament has ornamented me so much that I got the ornaments of, there is this saying that I got the ornaments on my body with the louse and the lies. And then having memorized this, that the next text that the monks memorize is Madhyamaka Avatara, which is to say
more longer, more thick, more pages.
Yes.
So more difficult.
Yes. So it becomes more difficult to commit to memory because of its length, and therefore the monks have such difficulty memorizing it to the point that they sometimes have to run away from the monasteries.
Anyway, so
Yes. And so we were talking about the conventional reality and ultimate reality, and so the ultimate reality, of course, is the true or the ultimate, the final reality of how things are, and which is also called emptiness. And so when we say that there is this ultimate reality, and sometimes what it is that it is called an understanding where you are not an ontological status of things, which is free from the two extremes of nihilism and eternalism. And so when when you really get deep insight into it, it's as if that things disappear from your mind. And so sometimes people even say that it is not findable. Nothing can be found when they talk about emptiness. And so that is not actually the case. But what we have to understand is that this emptiness or the ultimate reality is something which can be found by our cognition, our insight. Although in Master Shantideva's text, there is mentioned in the 9th chapter, it says that the ultimate so in the Master Shantideva says that the ultimate reality is not the object or objective domain of mind or law here, what we have to understand, according to some scholars, they do say that it is not the object of ordinary mind, but although it is an object of mind, because with the cognition which actually gains insight into that ultimate reality is mind, which actually realizes emptiness. And then according to some other scholars, they say that this ultimate reality is, of course, an experience of a direct perception of an Arya being. When an Arya being, in other words, when an Arya being realizes this emptiness, there is this direct experience of emptiness. And so that kind of experience that happens to an Arya being at that level of the path of seeing and beyond, it becomes something which is beyond an ordinary person's, ordinary being's conception, our thought, and also it is beyond our speech or expression. And so because of that, what is said in Shantideva's text is interpreted in that way, that it is not an object of an ordinary person's mind as such.
대권은 제루 서류기 개발에 아니 오모 오메 아니 가서다 동유도에 다외 쿨루스도 냠뇽을 고모고메 아니 그 시기는 또 그래 사시도가 로 전도 로 관계 주의면은 뜻이야.
And so, in fact, Master Shantideva himself has mentions in the same chapter, chapter 9 of the Bodhisattva Charya Avatara, that even having mentioned that understanding that there are understandings of the world and then the yogis, and so within the yogis, he mentions that because of their progressively higher realizations, the higher those who are on a higher level of perception of the called the ultimate reality actually outshine those of the low in the lower levels. And so this in fact very clearly shows that the ultimate reality is an object of mind. Otherwise we cannot talk about there being these progressive stages where the higher ones can outshine the lower ones in terms of ultimate understanding the profundity of the realizations in relation to that.
So now philosophical sort of part, these sort of concept, actually direct sort of antidote the kasota sympathy.
No. So so this understanding of emptiness would directly counter the grasping or clinging at some kind of a true objective existence in things.
가스케지와 공로 세베크도리아 유대 담바르신 any 취미기 남도 좋다. any 공로 세팅이지.
And so, as we already talked yesterday, when you become angry, when what happens is that first you hold on, you have a view of the object at which you get angry, as if there is an objective, solid kind of a person to whom or things to whom you get angry at, and then because of that distorted view about the object, the person, or the thing, then you tend to create some kind of a misconception about it, and it's like which is called the inappropriate mentation, as it's called, and because of that distorted view, then you actually become angry at the person.
Now, the main disciple of Nagarjuna, Aryadeva, the 400 verses, he mentioned, Lula Luwa Chishindu Timukun Najudes, Chene, Mig on was Didi, or Miglosobo, Wang Ding, so Nadiaris. Luigi won't de, Mig on was Umgun Chaviaris. Or petition do, and Desha ye you love a change chuck and zinda. T. Shadang Yamaris, Shadang, or Deputy Chowaris. Jadanga, Shadang, Chadang, so zindan, together. That this so say Yaris. In a Tinigarola, Deja change chucksa, Shadangi, Shena, Dansa, Tinigarolia, you damba. You tambo ziagil, Loti, Nigalo, Shichwas, Nigalo Yaris. So the need is an little launch to Timukul and you this. So no more Tamjada, Timuk kept the Yaris, Timuk Shichiaris. The day in the teacher, no more Tamjada, Timuk jump yours, this one.
So Master Aryadeva in his 400 verses says that just as the bodily faculty pervades or permeates all the rest of the faculties, likewise the ignorance also permeates all the other negative emotions. And so what is meant here is that just although the visual faculty and the eye faculty or these sensory faculties such as eye faculty, ear faculty, tongue, and so forth are separate from each other, but then what pervades them all is the physical faculty. And so, likewise, our attachment, desirous attachment, and anger, and so forth. Of course, when we have these experiences, they have their own way of looking at things. For example, when you are attached to somebody, then there is this exaggerated way of looking at things, the beauty of the person or things. Whereas it's totally different when you are angry or when you hate somebody. There is a total aversion. So these two states of mind are different. Where there is attachment, the hatred cannot come right there, and where there is hatred also simultaneously. Now, simultaneously, and where there is hatred, you cannot have attachment together there. But then, what is common to both is that both look at some kind of objective independent existence in the things that you are attached to or that you hate. And so that ignorance is what pervades both. And so, and then Master Aryadeva goes on to say that by overcoming and by overcoming this ignorance, then you can overcome the attachment and anger as well.
Mm-hmm. 다른 시간에 유고 정시변 돌이야 동과시와 겨와 매베츠 미시변은 로와 참비와스 대다 투증아에 탑주다 리고 자다케는 주르제 그래서 동과시와 겨와 매츠사야 남달 고스미 샤베 자 남달 고스물라 몽베 로티기 애니 둥이 자치거리 딘데 인도 어다 애니 남달 고스미 다 가서 그게 대코는 치지 말고 쉐야 탑라 좀 된 대기 아니 탑긴 넘버 멍구친 다 도마 강사가 다음에 라과수 배로 차잖아 떡지랑 다음에 라과지 송 되네 강사랑 아주 되게 제일 동에 다음에 제송 되네 강사랑 유튜브에 동에 강사 다음에 참모송 도선 탑기 주 면라치는 거 디민질이야 메다과 동요 디송도 공부루주기 메다 동에 동것이 자와숨 셈정체 초도 셈 정체와 동리랑 심해봐 인사 다디송도 저사다디디 탑기수 나버 투메 권에 티용요리스 다데네 다음에 다왔다는 포유드잖아 리고 자다케는 저번제스 교르죠 도시생 했든지 뭐로죠 찍도 되기 된지 저분은 저분을 줘 예매 경고 댄스로 써봐 나 근데 니가를 줘 가래니 가사 가 댄스사 근데 니가를 줘 가사 무시 경고 우마견을 용어다 지기 두면이 두면 지금이 시샤샤 다 뒤자야 저서 리그츠 몽고 손으로 다 리그츠 참원하고 콩도서디 다 댄지지를 거지. 댄에 딱와 사디시거든. 저선가 부터벌리데 칙디 칙 치면시도 말이야. 전다 되어래. 뭐니기 좀나 디니 샤베 샤베스. 저 강다 강이네. 저 찾다 대사 누구서 뭐니 주어지야나? 저디 sen시 다 샹데 그래서. 뭐니기 좀나 디니 샤베 샤베스. 댄에 딱베 지차스. 다 되게 한다. 윤제스를 그게 니야 주변이나 되는 샤과입니다. 거라 되면 장사바 거라 들이 준들이 들이 sen샤도. 딱고 뭐니지 주변 누구서 매바 이르잖아. 되는 샤고도. 자, 되봐도 맞아봐 뭔게. 다 되는 샤고마도 셰 전 매대버지다 세브샤 차이르잖아. 너다 때네 딱고 삼어도 매바를 때네 딱고 삼 인상 뭐니지 주고 요 말이 사다지 리베제부 댄디센스다 되죠.
And then also in another sutra called Rashtrapala Sutra, it is said that because of ignorance, not knowing the empty nature and then the peaceful nature and the nature of the unborn nature, called
The Judaism
no. And so, which actually refers to what was known as the three doors of liberation. And so, because of ignorance of these three doors of liberation, the sentient beings are called wander in samsara. And therefore, moved by his, the compassionate Buddha, and what he has done is that he has shown or taught various means through which the sentient beings are led out of this suffering. And so, so because of these, the ignorance or confusion about the three doors of liberation, which serves as the root of our suffering, we suffer, and therefore, in order to lead us out of this ignorance, out of this suffering, then the Buddha has actually shown us the means. Which is to say that he has shown us the reality, the true nature of things, how things are. And therefore, with regard to this true nature of things, the emptiness, and in terms of showing us the path leading out of this suffering, what the Buddha has actually done is led us, his disciples, in kind of a in an orderly kind of a manner, first by teaching with regard to selflessness. There is a teaching. There is teachings on the selflessness on a very gross level, which is to say that the selflessness of a person or an Atman, which is permanent, single, and autonomous. So such an Atman is rejected as the first step to leading into that selflessness, the deeper selflessness. And then after that, then the Buddha has also taught about the selflessness in terms of how a person is devoid of a self-sufficiently, substantially existent kind of a being, and which is the middle level kind of understanding of the selflessness. And so, having taught these, then finally he taught the deepest selflessness, which is that the things have having no independent or inherent existence at all. Now, in order to lead into these understandings of selflessness, then what the Buddha has actually taught is also to train our mind to go into this deeper understandings of selflessness. He taught how things are impermanent, and because of the being impermanent, how we because things are impermanent, therefore there is suffering as well. And so, in this way, the mind is trained through the meditation and understanding of self impermanence and suffering. And then, you are led into this understanding of the different degrees of selflessnesses. And Master Nagarjuna, in his Bodhichitta Vivarana, says that the Buddha has actually led us in this way, first leading us into understanding of impermanence and suffering, to train our mind to make it more matured for understanding selflessness. And then he teaches the grosser level and then the middle intermediate level of understanding of selflessness, and then finally into the lack of inherent existence. And therefore Master Nagarjuna says that the best means, or the highest means to purify our mind is the teaching, understanding of emptiness, or that things do not have any inherent existence at all. And so in order to gain this kind of understanding and insight into the deepest emptiness, then there are various reasonings that are used to prove that things do not have any inherent existence. And so there are certain reasonings which such as reasoning of the splinter, diamond splinter, which actually analyzes the nature of causes. And then there is the reasoning called lack of one and many, or absence of one and many, which investigates into the identity or the nature of things. And then there is also this analysis called the four alternatives, which searches into the nature of, looks into the nature of effects. And all these different reasonings are actually... And so, I'm sorry, there's a little correction here. So with regards to, in relation to investigating into the nature of fruits, we have the reasoning called the lack of arisal from things existent and non-existent. And then when investigating into the nature or the reality of both the cause and effect, then this other reasoning called the reasoning of the fourfold alternatives is used. And then all these different reasonings to demonstrate or to prove emptiness in this way boil down to the understanding of how things are dependently originated. And so within this context, we should understand that things are merely designated. And so everything whatsoever is merely designated, and therefore they are dependent on other factors and dependent in terms of being designated. And so if things do not depend on any designation, if they do not depend on anything else, then we cannot talk about this and that and so forth. And therefore Buddha Palita, in his text, Buddha Palita treatise, which is a commentary to and so Buddha Palita, which is a commentary to Master Nagarjuna's Madhyamaka, Mula Madhyamaka Karika, which may be one of the earliest commentaries to this text. In there, Buddha Palita says that if things were to have any intrinsic existence in themselves, then we can just say we do not need to resort to any other factors to talk about things. They could just be established on their own by themselves. But then, so he says that that's not the case. But if things were to have any kind of intrinsic existence, he says what need is there. So if things were to have any intrinsic existence, inherent or independent existence, then what need is there for things to be dependently designated?
Quantum physics
and so in this way, the reasoning to prove emptiness, which is called the king of reasoning, is said to be the reasoning of dependent origination, that everything is dependently originated, is the reason to prove that nothing exists independently. And so yesterday also we talked about quantum physics. According to quantum physics, we can say that there is nothing which objectively exists.
theoretically, the four school of thought. Yesterday also I mentioned the Vivashik, Sondandik. Pajir and the Dinduyare Kasa. Dujin Choji Chami. That's Susan. Dujin Choji Chami. Shiva Giji Chami. Sungudoga. Da the Jundo Komalia, da Chami Mabri, Shitman Chaja Capture. Shiva Dungi Chatjava. Susan Kandakaine, Chajas. Seals, but Chashas, Tramigan living in it, go charge Chayongaris. There, that charge Charles, Zimotune, called a Sujin Chuji, Yinshinjala, go Yoran Shirwa. Go Yo in Duzane, go Yos, Laduko, Chig, that could do the unit of the unit, go to Rodego. Just like Yo in Duzane, go Yo merged the Devjig Ningro. The Kawaii Neda, Papa, Kazas. Papa passing 타만 이해하면 되지. 자, 들이 인도한다. 샘잠배 다 시바 된좀 되고요. 치르기 과야들라. 다 가서 차세마도 초지 차전시마도 참여요 말이지. 다좀 사셔서 세인도잖아요. 아니 싸우는 이해하면 되고 하스. 디드 치든 거버지 버려 딜레용 거. 다 오마베 다디 가서 그게 치든 담버 주고 고기요를 마도 치든 고고 말이스. 배나 차도 잼마제 당시 당하는 윤두 셰바디에 차셔레스. 아니 셰바이니야요 말이스. 저 치송이 있네. 따뜻한 얘기 말이지. 대신은 나는 즈버 있네. 따뜻한 얘기 말이지. 다 때는 매번 말이 패는 적이요. 그래. 드리면 이두산에 어다 아니 때는 딱섬레스. 지들 때는 딱섬 그 시바시 샤고도 전에 때는 딱섬 그 수진 그 샤토 그래스. 저 치든 과거에면 두스. 수어 던다버 주고 과야마도 탄예도 민자 따요선 그 수만 과거예요 말이지. 딜로벨 랭랭기 뒤숭겨래. 애도 또 나와서 송도와 세우시지. 다 어디는 자리나 now text.
So here we can say that according to the philosophical schools, they say when it comes to the external objects like matter and so forth, and they do have their called special extension, and then when it called there are the philosophical schools which assert that there is when you investigate into these atoms and the objects, what you come to is a point where you conclude that they conclude that there is no that there is a kind of a particle which is without any special extension or any parts as such, so partless particle. And then when with regard to consciousness, there are those philosophies which assert that there is when you actually break down the consciousness into its different moments, then you come to a point where there is an instant of consciousness which is called which is without any called momentary parts to it as well. But then and so called in the case of these philosophical schools, called what is said is that when it comes to matters, external matters, you can break them up into smaller parts, and then go deeper and deeper. Whereas, even when you are at the very subtle level of those matters, then they still have their their special paths, the extension, special extension, and they have their directional paths as well. And so even if you cannot talk about directional paths, I mean, in a grosser sense, still what we can say is that when the atoms, the particles get into the very subtle level, there is still a movement at the level of energies or things like that. There is still, we can talk about movement, and therefore when where there is a movement, you can talk about a rear and an anterior part to that thing, and therefore this shows that they still have different directional parts as well. But then when you actually try to look for the identity of that the particles, I mean, ultimately, of course, you will not be able to pinpoint anything as being this or that. And so therefore, in the case of Chittamatras, although they do assert that consciousness has an independent or called existence, but then when it comes to matter and particles, they say that, of course, when we see things, we can break them up into smaller parts, and then that those smaller parts also can be divided into subparts and so forth. And then through this kind of analysis, what we get come down to is, according to the Chittamatras, they say that nothing can be actually found within the matter, and therefore, because nothing can be found within the matter, down to the smallest atoms and so forth. And when you look for an atom, you still break it up into subparts and so forth. And therefore, because you cannot find anything, and ultimately they say there's no external existence at all. Although the consciousness still is asserted to have some kind of called independent existence, the matter is said to be non-existent, external, and therefore they say there's no external existence. But then from the point of view of Madhyamakas, just as the consciousness does not have any kind of independent existence, because it is also formed of various moments. So consciousness arises moment by moment, and therefore just as a consciousness does not have any independent objective existence, which means that if you try to look for consciousness or mind within it, I mean, you will not be able to come to a point where you can say, this is that thing, this is the consciousness as such. And therefore, when you try to find what you designate as consciousness, I mean, you cannot find an objectively existent, I mean, entity called consciousness as such. And so likewise, they say anything that is matter outside of us, I mean, they also are posited through although they cannot be found to have any objective existence, yet they can, just as the consciousness can be posited, I mean, conventionally designated, likewise the external things also can exist by way of our designation. And therefore, they say that there is no need, like the Chittamatras do, there is no, they say that, the Madhyamakas say that there's no need to say that there's no external objects, no need to say that the external objects do not exist. But then, while saying that external objects do exist, they do not have any objective independent existence as such. And therefore, what gives them the identity of being existence is merely by way of our designation, using labels and conceptions. And so therefore, in conventional terms, things do exist called as designated, whereas and also consciousness do exist called by way of labeling. And therefore, there's no need to say that the external things do not exist as such.
I think every phenomena which is momentarily changing exists in time. Now time, examine time. past, present, future. The past and future depend on present. Now present, if we investigate present eon, present century, present a decade, or year, month, go to that, week, day, then hour, minute, second. Just 1 second past, 1 second future, no present. We cannot find present. Time always moving, so no present. Without present, we can't define past and future. Complicated, isn't it? No. So the conclusion is just mere designation without investigate. If we investigate, we can't find anything. We can't find anything pinpoint. No, this is this. No. 자장가 명점, 시징중나로 명점, 다점 세송샤디.
And so, in the therefore, in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, it's said that everything is merely a name and merely designated.
So now it is quite clear. When we met our enemy, or remember enemy, then there's something absolute negative enemy, and then get anger, and face also become red, and breathing also something. So at that time, you see, you get the impression something independent, absolute negative, clear. So then analyze, what is the real enemy? His body, his mind, his speech? No. Where he? The person, you see, who feel anger also is now examined. My body, beside my body, my mind, my speech, where I? So that's the way the analytical meditation about that reality is the opposing the concept of something independent sort of existence. That is the basis of all these destructive emotion. That's the way. So now they are sort of self-centered attitude. That even arahata also, you see, have some sort of some level of self-cherishing way. Even Bodhisattva, rangdu chengju,
so even in the case of and so even in the case of bodhisattvas, they do have this wish for themselves to become enlightened. They do have self-interest, and then
so selflessness does not mean you simply forget your own right. No. In order, often you say, I telling people, I also feel the Bodhisattva is really realistic selfish. The best way fulfill your own sort of interest is taking care about other. Altruistic attitude. Fulfill. Best way for your own interest. So that selfish is wise selfish. Our selfish, very foolish selfish. Just forget others' right and even exploit other, harming other. Clear? So that kind of selfish very much linked with this grasping. Tenzin, ran jinjin, dindegi tako, gyanjengi, jinjin, pungna dengengi, jinjin deda, dangzin yuti, but chikpen chikdoshin pungpo ten dedo.
So this kind of extreme self-centered attitude goes together always with, which in fact causes us all kinds of misfortune, always go together with clinging to some kind of independent or true existence in things.
That the tabjichane altruism 장야체. 시르고 차네 아주 가서 우리에게 랑진진 배 띠도 랑진진 디다 덴진을 아니 시르고 냠보대. 다 도스도 하죠.
And so when it comes to practicing, applying the teaching within oneself in terms of practice, we can cultivate the method aspect of the practice through the cultivation of altruistic attitude. And then in terms of the wisdom aspect of practice, we can cultivate that wisdom which goes directly counter to this ignorance about the reality of things, and which in turn imbues this cherishing, extreme self-centered attitude.
Yeah. So now this text now. So this text, something like
the 37 practices of Bodhisattva.
Comprise that.
Yes. And so this text actually teaches us in a very summarized kind of way the practice of these two methods and wisdom.
The altruism.
Yes. And so mainly it emphasizes the practice of altruism.
In the altruism, the shiruk taught in Roku Winston, good treasure to the Shamlimus, Yarla, so treasure to Namuluki Shorayas, Kangi Chugun, Rome, Mesikyang. Droit on the chick to Zanzabas, that diggy. Lamadon Gobujanis, Charts, Lamadon Gobujanis, conditions, Lavna. You and they need the Tabjichane, droit on the chick to Zambazavas, Tabashanji, Chanju Simotone, chick to droit on the Zambazava. Shirukuchane, Zawachev, you Simja, Russian, Dr. Zanikimeva. Zawaburani, Dr. Zanikimeva. 제 자와대에 따라서 얘기해야 돼. 근데 인도산에 출근 좋아도 겨와도 가고 직도 다돼. 어다 자시로 최전하리야. 가서 한게 가서 관계 된지도 보죠. 각반매 봐. 깨매 봐. 차반매 봐. 땅매 봐. 오매 봐. 좀매 봐. 다돼 되면 된심인 전에. 된중 저배 다 깨다 차와. 다 뒤숭도 어디. 강기축은 로 메시장스 인루 최외 아니 롱올라 저베 다 강도야 뭐지 레스 레데 마다 마자병 안에 때네 딱외 디도 녀베 로셈제 여다 근데 인도산에 다 강기축은 로 메시장 저도는 찍도 전자 봤어 니네 지성기 동력이 따와로 과차바 이나 동에 타다 띠무 댄징이 제바지 통용도 전에 띠무 댄징 세야디 녀보 맞게 봐 코너 레버 마도 그 심해 심하지 그 시도도 대인도 전에 배 심해 등에기 몽고지기 왕기 동에 용도 통용도 다 될래야 강다 다 테스나 삼에 동일이 경되고 것이 리하도가 어다 진짜들이다 닝지대 아니 지금 줘야도 좀 잡았어 아주 자시르기 덤베 거진 제목은 대장자한테 다가라르샤 관계 투부의 녀송네 따와터제 방배치 시송샤야 돼 투지심도 상황도 송네 다 저에든 자단디 아니 친절로 따왔어요 거네 동네를 좋아하세요 아마도 믿어 어다 뒤대
And so, but when it comes to helping and serving others, called purpose, called altruism, is also complemented or by wisdom. So altruism is practiced on the basis of understanding the reality of things, and therefore this text emphasizes, although emphasizes altruism, but it is done so within the understanding of the reality of things through wisdom. And so here the first verse, which is a verse of homage to Avalokiteshvara, it says, "I pay constant homage through the three doors to my supreme teacher and protector Chandrasik, who, while seeing all phenomena lacking, coming and going, makes single-minded effort for the good of living beings." And so what is shown here is this is a homage to the master, one's master and Chandrasik, and they are praised through two qualifications, on the basis of two qualifications, which are the skillful means or methods aspect of the experience or practice, which is which is mentioned or referred by the saying by this last line, where it says, "Make single-minded effort for the good of living beings," and then the line where it says, "Who, while seeing all phenomena lack, coming and going," that shows the wisdom side of the practice. And so the wisdom here is to be understood in terms of, although that in terms of understanding that there's nothing that can be found when you try to analyze or investigate into things or analyze things. You cannot pinpoint anything as being this or that. And so, although there is the compassion of the masters and our masters and Chandrasik, of course, which goes to the sentient beings, directed to sentient beings, we should still understand that there is no, in the ultimate in ultimate analysis, there is no called compassionate one, nor some beings to be compassionate at, and there is no action of being compassionate, and so forth. And so in this way, we can actually do this kind of analysis into the final nature of things by understanding that ultimately there is no coming and going, there is no oneness and multiplicity and so forth. As Master Nagarjuna in his salutation verses of Mula Madhyamaka Karika says that I prostrate to the perfect Buddha, the best of the teachers, who taught that whatever is dependently arisen is unceasing, unborn, not annihilated, impermanent, not coming, not going, not without distinction, without identity, and free from conceptual constructions, and being peaceful. And so what this shows is that in the ultimate sense, there is nothing which we can find, which means that when you actually look or search for the ultimate reality, the how things actually exist, nothing can be found that we can point at as being this and that. And therefore, and although things do not have any kind of existence in that way, still we can talk about coming and going, sentient beings, and compassionate ones, and so forth, only on the basis of how understanding how things are dependently designated. And therefore, once you understand that things are dependently originated, designated, merely designated, then what you can see is how, when you see the suffering sentient beings, you can see that although they do not want suffering, they still suffer because of this ignorance. And so they call all this ignorance, what you find when you see the reality of things, the final reality of things, is that you see that this ignorance is without any sound basis. you know, and it's only the case that we have not yet been able to cultivate the counter force, which actually can through which we can overcome this ignorance. It's only the matter that we have not yet cultivated, or this understanding, or the antidote has not yet arisen in us, grown in us. But then the ignorance itself has no sound basis. And so when you see that, then you will be able to feel compassionate towards other sentient beings, how they cause themselves suffering, and you feel them dear to you, how the suffering becomes unbearable to you, the suffering of sentient beings, and therefore you want, you through this understanding of how things, how ignorance is baseless, when you understand reality, then you will also have this determination and the courage to liberate other sentient beings. And so there is this compassion, this great compassion, which actually not just wishes, but actually you want to save sentient beings out of suffering. And therefore, Master Nagarjuna, in his praise to the Buddha, in paying his gratitude for teaching dependent origination, at the end of Mula Madhyamaka Karika, says, moved by your compassion, you taught, you taught the sacred Dharma in order for us to rid of our distorted views.
Oh yeah. So this sentence, the last sentence of the Mula Madhyamaka Mula Karika, I always, as soon as I wake up, I recite that word and some kind of salutation to Buddha, mainly his teaching about emptiness and altruism. It's very helpful, very helpful. So now, for example, the person who got sort of serious illness, but because of the curable illness. So our sort of attitude is different. The person who have one disease, there's no possibility to cure. Then we feel very pity like that. Then curable disease, then it's more enthusiasm to help, bring some medicine, or bring to hospital and give some medicine, because it can cure. There is a possibility to overcome that illness. Then, so also the more realistic sort of enthusiasm to help. Clear. So once you realize the ultimate sources of suffering can remove, then you see the sense of concern of their well-being becomes something stronger. Clear. So the wisdom and compassion very much related. Compassion, 가서다 동해다 잔득 닝지, 동해를 좀득 닝지. 와다 동해를 다 차에서 다 동해를 차나 선배 섬식. 야 동해를 싹하다 가라 잘라 텔스. 동해를 자와 차가 냐베 잔득 닝지. 다디 좀득 닝지라서.
And so within compassion, there is a compassion with, which actually is just a wish, that you wish that somebody may be out of suffering. But then there's a second level of compassion, which is not just staying at this wish level, but then you actually want to work for the beings.
So the second type of compassion very much combined with wisdom. The first part, just wish, like that. So now, the second verse is, 편지중에 저가 산자는 담주 둘레 중에 대안에 대일 라리시라 라레베 계산은 라리시라 차스. 다 쳐두고 라래 다 드시.
And so Zon just read the second verse, which says, perfect Buddha's source of all being, well-being and happiness arise from accomplishing the excellent teachings. And this depends on knowing the practices. So I will explain the practices of bodhisattvas. So this is like the pledge to compose the text.
로 림베야 냐라 과차야라 지금 가서 그게 남영소 과차 과디 쉬우지 계시 모르셔. 저 남중에 추슈시도 전에 냐라 산직쇼 못지야디 시기. 생어도 별이야 디자레 내 다과도 시되게 별이야 아니 컴바지 캠부지 자리야 미시 자가 용거래 아니 디니무디 캠부슈메체 아니 캠부시브지데 nga 캠부 자고요 캠부 가 타브레스 그래서 더 캠부 슈메스 캠부 보모를 신하고가 신송 차브레다 신하고가 타송송 저장간주 야고지 낭주 모주전 야고지 맞잖아 오 저러 되고 사는 야라 루다 선에는 야와 차년 때 작년 때 선이 십순두전에 보모를 신하고 왜 야로 떠서였다 이제 보모라서 배 셰다가 셰제 이디 셔시다 지기베리 지기유 돈도로 이디 적신 돈도시 라메 로만 고고 로메 라만 고고 제타 도딕도 가지고 the critical comment now.
So it's very important when you go about with the practice of the Dharma to develop an understanding whereby you have a holistic understanding of the entire the path, the system of how you go about and
whole system.
Now
that's very, very important.
And so it's very important to do that. And so because of that, I always when I give Dharma teachings or discourses, I always give this broad overview of how, like an introductory form, how to have this holistic or understanding of the whole system of the path. And so otherwise what will happen is the teachings, when the lamas give teachings, it would sound like frightening people, because there is a story here. In calm area of Tibet, there was a monastery, and some people came to visit the abbot of the monastery. And then one of the attendants of the abbot was there, and the people asked where the abbot went. And the attendant's response was that the abbot had actually gone to the town or the village to frighten the elderly people. So what this refers to is that if we are not careful, the lamas, when they give teachings to people, they might say that, you have to be very careful in terms of practicing the Dharma, because if you do
you should practice, you should follow Guru Yoga, you should respect me, you should have faith to me, and then little the lower tune, bring more money. You will get immense sort of
merits. No, immense merit.
Immense merits.
No.
Recently, I heard one Tibetan monk. I know that person. Good scholar, genuine, authentic sort of practitioner. So usually, he gives teaching. There's explanation. And it's almost like educate people. Another Chinese Buddhist, attend that. And then that Chinese was expressed, oh, your Lama give us a lot of work, study, and meditation like that. My Lama, not that way. My Lama telling us, the Chinese my Lama is telling us, bring money, then you send to Sukhabadi,
heaven.
Heaven. I will send you. You don't need any work, just bring money. really, really it's very silly, very dangerous. Such sort of activities really degenerate Buddha Dharma. Buddha Dharma is full of enthusiasm, seeing the goal, final destination, Buddhahood, and also know how to achieve that. With fuller knowledge, then you get full sort of enthusiasm, courage, willpower, then practice. That's the way, not out of fear or hell. And Buddha, the first Four Noble Truths, Dungen Shebra Cha Sayadi, Dungi Dungen Saranga, Nyawa Saranga Dungi Kishti Remenduwa, Namji Zaya Nang Sung Shadi, Duji Dungen Lagone, Kasa Dungenini, Kasa, Duji Dungen Lagone, Dakaraini, Dungen Shebra Cha Sayadi, Duji Dungen Sungyaris. She Dungen Bosumba, Duji Dungen Sungtua, Duji Dungen Samne Tabatin Tigro. Nganju Dungi Dungen Samni, Semtoras was the case of the war. That delay Nganju Dungen Samni, Migijum Sundavala Pengerwa, Remado Sanjay show, Mamati, Tabatu.
So when in the teaching on the Four Noble Truths, when the Buddha said, know that there is suffering, he was not referring mainly to suffering like hell realm, pains in hell realm and so forth. But then what he's actually pointing to is the third level of suffering. Within suffering, there are three types of suffering, which are known as the suffering of suffering, the painful experiences that we know as undesired, and then the suffering of change, and then the third level is called the conditioned existential pervasive suffering. So that when the Buddha says no suffering, this is what he is pointing to. By understanding this conditioned existence as being suffering, then we would be able to really generate a true wish or determination to be out of suffering, and not so much thinking about the suffering of suffering, although by thinking or reflecting on painful experiences such as the suffering in the lower realms of existence, unfortunate realms, we may be able to practice or restrained from the 10 non-virtuous actions. We may be able to practice that morality of keeping the 10 virtuous actions. It doesn't necessarily lead directly to the liberation. And so mainly the teaching on suffering is, the purpose of the teaching of suffering is to lead us to nirvana.
Yeah. So, the aim Buddha Dharma is nirvana, moksha. In order to achieve moksha, nirvana, as I mentioned earlier, we need that wisdom which understands shunyata. So that only human being can analyze that. Other Brahmanas cannot. So therefore, in order to carry practice or effort to reach moksha, the human body, human brain is highly necessary. Therefore, as a practitioner, first step, we should accumulate the guarantee or sources to get human life.
Rebirth.
Human rebirth. So now here, Arya Deva, 400 verses, you see, he mentioned Sunam Mimba Tambur Dos. Pardo Dan and Dobar Che. Tamar Tashi Gundoba, Teshitani Kabayans.
And so in the 400 verses, and so in the 400 verses, Master Aryadeva says that first avoid or overcome the unmeritorious actions or practices, and then in the middle overcome this grasping at self, and then finally overcome all distorted views. And so one who is able to understand this is a wise person. And so what he's actually teaching us is how to go about with the practice which leads, with the practices leading to higher rebirth, and then in the middle, having gained that, then how to reach or attain nirvana, and then finally how to attain the omniscient state of Buddhahood.
다 당고 천진낭신 도야 된다.
So in relation to the first line of these 400 verses, which teaches us how to avoid unmeritorious actions, we go through the text.
다데 전조 주진이가 톱준들 다시 코야 소리 제제실 닌더천도 이와 매번니 녀성 고마 제살라니 다데네 태성 검송 냠니 지도자네 지 가서 되게 단연기 게다 눈지 샤와도 침바이나 아니 계속 누구지 근데 인도 보유 가서 주고 년지 சொல்ல 대사 출어요 다이 சொல்ல 시당 매장 봐 랑도 집에 뜨무미나지 보유 봉에 살라네 용의 방법이 너무 림지지 남이 매배 계속 안게 별 리포트함을 출는 시기 멤버들밖에 살라네 다디기 전주 전신이가 곰니 천디 태성 검속에 둔다 시아디지.
And so verses number 1, 2, and 3 shows that how we should engage ourselves in the practice of developing or hearing or listening to the teachings and developing the understanding based on that, and then also understanding based on reflection or contemplation, and then also the meditation. And so when you do these practices and listening to teaching, reflecting on the meaning, and then meditating, it is important for us to not to be distracted by love-hate kind of attitudes related to one's near and dear ones, and also those adversaries. And so one should not be led astray by them. And so this is what is taught. And so in these 3 verses, together what it shows is how to go about with the practice of listening to the teaching, reflecting, and meditating, by reflecting, by knowing this preciousness of human life, and to see that it is a meaningful one.
되네 다 치면낭신 도와 메다고 보면.
And then next comes meditation on impermanence, which is to counter.
Impermanence, two levels. One impermanence is 균기미다와. 땅도 치워미다와 시오.
So one level of understanding impermanence is, the severing of a continuity of something. And so, for example, when you meditate on the impermanence and death, that is the kind of meditation on the grosser level of impermanence.
The more subtle level, impermanence is momentarily changing. See, what is the causes of momentarily changing is its own causes. So therefore, you see, all phenomena which are momentarily changing is actually
so they are subject to causes.
자상가 내린지 풍부 깨지기 지배 더니 전디 두 머리비 샤완체레스. 근데 인도 동명하신 것도.
And so the kind of psychophysical combination or aggregate that we have is understood to be under is subject to ignorance. And so because of such an ignorance, and therefore, because of the ignorance being its primary cause, therefore, this kind of psychophysical aggregate that we have is said to be in the nature of suffering.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, you see that telling us that sort of thinking, or sort of give us the impression we at the moment we are slave of ignorance. So more desire to overcome that. That is the genuine desire to achieve moksha, liberation. From where you liberate, eliminate ignorance. So wisdom becomes very, very important. Now the union drop, because a union drop, zashi soso de bebe drop, no zashi luyin drop, namshin drop, sendil la jesa la le. Then 강단 drop, tuksun be joson go be chawan, changden yin be gyurche be zhanghe bawa jesa la. Kashi tena nyeba so yonda yango da be be shinye da ba rang lu be jebr ziba jesa la le sen. Desha. Da dene chimar dewe tabdan basayati. Rāyāng khoya gyamdō lēnzhē nīpa di. Rāyāng khoya zōna chikwa jidān lāya sūshī gyōba nī. Tishir kāngla gyamna mēluwe guñchō gyamdō gyāsā lāni. Shindū sōka ngā sōng tō ngā nō dikwe lēji dhivu tūwe sōng. Tishir sōla pōjō dikwe lē nāyā mēshī gyāsā lāni. Wāda digi jōjīgi gyīvu sūm sēni dēzhēn rō sūng shēba nānga tādi gyīvu chūngmī labni di sūng bārdā.
Yes. And so it's only just read from verse number 4 through to the end of verse number 7. And so what these show is how we should avoid preoccupation with the pleasures of the next life, and then these lines also show the practices pertaining to beings with a small scope, which is in accordance with the tradition of Lamrim, the graduated or the stages of the path to enlightenment, which comes from Master Adisha.
That issue de sisum dewa tsasi sebashi yuzum shiki jikbi shishin namya minjo tarbiya kobanso tono nyewa jisalani. That yuzum shiki jikbi shishin sida suhante that haji chachina anda rakwe midagwa sungorela da chaya midagwa. That is zozo given rinkodo chaya midagwa tere. Tishi mida le dungene na dame song se sunsha da dirisha. Chene dati given ringdishe. Da sibo kowe da danger condition ene yidemeba luwe rungshin bo tone da tabaden yolo zon duji dunge samne da tabaden yolo chaya dire.
And so and so verse number 8 and 9 read, and so verse 9 shows the very subtle understanding or level of impermanence, which is to say that things changing momentarily, and then in connection with Master Aryadeva's verse, which says in the middle, get rid of clinging to self. This verse also shows that the meaning or the same subject matter. And so mainly what we should understand here is that to cultivate this wish or the aspiration to liberation by understanding the existential, conditioned nature of suffering.
다 탈바 토발라 질 있는 가서 그래. 담이 니도와 강사가 담에 최이 담에 디도 제법보다 디도 영어보다 다 그때 그 담에다 롱제제 풍소 그때 그 담에서 담이 니셰 가사가 담에 최이 담에 니셰 다 전도니가 가사가 담에서 맞 최이 담에 송해셔 웃음니가 최이 담에 송 나는 낭식이 usim 좀 되나라 좀더 많이 나라 아니 nyomu pongwa la kansa dame gomba tsang chogo res, che dame gomba res, sumi chik. Da umo ba, tanya tuyo rangze mishi ba, lu rugu tumu mo yinpe da sheba dadu song yundu zane, wada che yi dangzi kansa ga dangzi shi chigi yore. Dine yundu zane, dame chamu togo res, kansa dame rakwa togo yungu ma re, kansa dame chamu togo res. 자, 다운데 바도 다는 더블 쳐야 돼. 다 가서 우리 강사가 담에 좀 떠니 아니 다 등진 더블 쳐야 강사가 등진 더블 쳐야 대점 고면 쳐. 다 시리 보면 쳐도 고모모이 봐. 녀무 보면 쳐도 건배 다 동니 고면야 돼. 녀무 좀 보면 쳐도 동니 고면이잖아요. 다디 녀몽이 녀물 쳐버 봐도 시리고 녀물 죽여 말이야. 그래서 내지게다 담에 고마데 봐도 다는 더블 쳐야 돼. 자네 야고 이거 소리도. 타만 다시 군도 봤어. 당연히 뒤켜면. 맞아? 저 독세. 뒤송아. 다 진짜 인도산에 좀더 마시 낭세게 다지 캐베 공부주지 시바 메다메다 여기디 시에고야 돼. 시라 개좀 그래. 애니 지도르신 도 상당하나. 애니 제 병원에 전에 고띵 침을 해야지도. 낭배 치고 고 낭배 떠루 고띵 침을 해야지.
And so, in order to attain nirvana,
제가 로벨 랭댕기 아니 우문님 부장전 나라 좀 되고 십송도가 친한 거좀더 랑데 좀더 십송도가 대제선 전에 표기 개발 뭔고 좀더 세션 자야 그래 디 캐치 모르자 디 다야 돼.
And so, in order to attain nirvana, we should meditate on the selflessness nature of things, that things do not have any I'd call independent selfhood or existence. And so within this, of course, there is this selflessness of other phenomena and persons and phenomena. Persons here refer to, for example, if you call an actor, an agent, a doer of things, and so there is no independently existing self, and then there is also no independently existing psychophysical aggregates which we experience as well. And so this is to say that the selflessness of called phenomena other than persons. And then, in order to, with regard to the teaching on selflessness, of course, there are of persons and phenomena. We have the different philosophical schools within Buddhism, such as those Vaibhashikas and Sotantikas. These two schools of philosophy do assert selflessness of persons, whereas they do not assert selflessness of phenomena. And then, whereas the next two, the other two philosophical schools, Chittamatra and Madhyamaka, they do assert selflessness of persons as well as selflessness of phenomena. And of course, there is a difference in degree of subtlety within the understanding of selflessness of persons and phenomena, and therefore Chittamatras and some of these schools and sub-schools within Chittamatra and the Madhyamaka, they say that in order to overcome our negative emotions, the destructive emotions, the kileshas, it's not necessary for the practitioners to cultivate this insight or penetrative insight into the selflessness of phenomena, but it is enough or sufficient to cultivate this penetrative insight into selflessness of persons. Whereas the followers of Master Nagarjuna especially those who, the followers of Master Nagarjuna, who do not accept any intrinsic existence. According to them, they say that in order to overcome even these negative emotions that are within ourselves, the disturbing conceptions, we must have penetrative understanding or insight into the very subtle level of the selflessness of persons, not just remaining at the very gross understanding of selflessness, but the subtlest selflessness of persons as well. And so there must be this realization, the subtle realization of subtle selflessness of persons as well. And here, when in context or in connection with Master Aryadeva's line, which says in the middle, get rid of this clinging to self, we could understand it to mean that we need to understand selflessness, this subtle selflessness, not only to overcome negative emotions, but also to overcome these stains, that the residual stains that are left by these negative emotions, which are called cognitive obscurations, or obscuration to knowledge. So even for that, to overcome that, we need to meditate on the selflessness of persons as well. And so what these show is that it's very necessary for us to, important for us to gain a deeper understanding of the philosophical deliberations of these different schools, and read the different texts written by the different masters of different philosophical schools, and compare and contrast in order to gain a deep, understand the deeper philosophical implications. And so, accordingly, the Master Bhaviveka has written Madhyamaka Hridaya text, and which deals with all the different classical Indian philosophical schools, non-Buddhist schools as well as Buddhist philosophical systems. And so, following this text, many Tibetan masters of all the different traditions have written texts which are called Trupta, the system of philosophy. And so it is very important for us to study these texts in order to gain deeper understanding.
Yeah. 다들 내가 다들 인다. 타마 다시 군도 봐. 생각. 다들 아니 산지지고 토베시도 시주봉야. 다 특징을 남지셔요. 다 될라 아니 동리 따와 직배이나야. 동리 따와 시르고 냠불 교와라. 장주고 쌤기 짭된 고기야래. 그래서 장주고 쌤기 짭된데 제베 동리 따와 고민도 전에 동리 따와 시르고 냠불 고민도 동번이 따와 거봐 연수 소에 주고 거봐 사드 샤버래. 아니 건배 주고에 지금도 타협에 거네 고배하다디 샤버래. 답은 자와시럽다고. 라진이 스톱든 나라. 다 라지 망셔게도 담에 주고도 와. 아다 담에 두다 리벨 고 메다 두제 아니 최전메다 메다들 타는데 두고도 와. 다들 지금도 타이거네. 담에 달라 봐서지 뭐 차죠. 어제 리셔. 다들라 도미 준에 달라 잡아서 만원동 하듯이 이제 타였으면 이제 전주스님 계산하니. 동해물 딱들 들리 잡아서 이제 셴배스면 뒤치 딱들 생겨 동해다 여다죠. 계산하니. 스타 쇼로가 니버디기 당신 냠지고 신경 거야 들이. 다디 십저 준준하려 여대 다 들을게요 야말이. 우머지 태어나려 야리. 정주 섬전하려 야리. 에네 아들이 십저다 준주르샤. 아다지 딱 그래. 다디네 가서 되고 지 장주섬 냠린 집에 거두려 믹스에다 차단게야 디녀부터 해야 돼. 수다 되전왕게 다게 너 탐자 조금 초도 주는 리도는 주선 개와는 다른 거 계산하여 다른 일 주선미도 다른 거 강다 다른 거 최신나 닝지왕게 대에 띄고는 다른 거 계산하네. 것이 다른 면에서 동숨체로 적을 전에 차별수 일라야. 디니지 연대주가 계산하. 로만 뒤에 유순 것이기 창내 주시 생애만아야 달라 계획이 두시지 그걸 되고 계산하네. 다게 부신식으로 잡고 다게 다라 자신 다고 전에 내게 되면 불러 마셔도 타버서 계산하니 랑도 냠바 매베 교이 나게왕기 니도 전에야 라마신도 그외等于 저월로 계산하니 초야 포시 다도 메인 섭신도 된지 답장 라 루그디도 달라는 심을 계산하니 냠버 자신 로마 지윤도 남도 부인 농도 토주장 시베베니 우메스네 경험을 계산하니 랑게 시장적으로 뭐든 치료자고 tuy야 패신 표현줄 지지 잠든지 먹은 그 런줄도 계산하니 대배연데 렌즈 추던다 지점 제지 세바 표현줄 강의 현실계 응원으로 찾아보고 계산하니 다 디버도 구조 전주고 선 객스 폰드 지금 그거 있으면 고미야 객스 폰드도 좀 있었다.
And so verses 10 to 21 are read. And so in connection with verse number 11, what this shows is that of the cultivation of bodhicitta, this altruistic intention of bodhicitta, which is done through equaling and exchanging self and others. And so with regard to that practice, we can find an explanation of that in Master Nagarjuna's Ratnavali, and also his Bodhicitta Vivarana. But then in order to understand and in order to learn this practice in great detail, you should read Master Shantideva's Bodhisattva Charya Avatara, which deals with this practice of equaling and exchanging self and others in a great detail. And then from here to 21, what is shown is in terms of now when you cultivate this conventional bodhicitta, this aspiring and or conventional bodhicitta, the altruistic intention, these verses show how to avoid, what are the obstacles to them, and then how to avoid those obstacles, overcome the obstacles, as well as how to boost your cultivation of bodhicitta further.
다데 다 전동 전주 좀 고려해야 된다. 다 동의도 하고 고려해야 돼. 지들 나온데다 랑sem 심이 되네 저배 타던 제 디니션의 송지 참아는 이름이 계산하니. 다 되게 동의 고려 냠샤 난 것도 중수사 들이. 다 되게 아니 다 측전디 제 넘리보다 가서다 말이 우모벌은 나시 니체니 즉사입니다. 내저집에 제 우모변 더번은 지체니 시주yap세 시번은 지체 때네 대셔. 다야 상제적도 나와서 시번은 지체 때네 대셔就是디냠상나 것도 좀 주셔야 돼. 디슈구디 이동의 유도 차바나 야기 투기 자준 지신도 제벌나야 대벌 메대신 샤샤봉하게살라래 동연나서 메는 부시다 추나 대벌선 아당체 지신 미주자다 차베세 추벌다고 게살라네 있어 다 디기 제도 규모도 왜냐면 사들이.
And so verses 22 through to 24. So these verses, verse number 22 downwards shows the practice or cultivation of bodhicitta, which is called the ultimate bodhicitta. And so verse number 22, in fact, shows this ultimate bodhicitta, which is also called the cultivation of sustaining meditation on the sky-like or the space-like absorption. And this particular verse can be explained from the point of view of the Yogacara Madhyamaka system, founded by Master Shandarakshita, and then his followers. So we can explain it according to this philosophical school, or it can also be explained from the point of view, from the perspective of the Madhyamaka Prasangika system, followed by Master Buddhapalita and Master Chandrakirti and others. And then verse number 23 shows that the practice of meditating on or reflecting on the illusion-like emptiness, or during the post-meditation session.
다들 샘진의 친루냐면 지하들다.
And next comes the practice of the 6 perfections after having cultivated this altruistic intention of bodhicitta.
저주되베 류자당 거는 지름고번 올라 묘지고 지질랜드 남이 미래에 집어동화 계산라이. 수림해봐 랑도 면도나 현도 두번도 개면에 티실 시베 두번해봐이 수림송화 계산라이. 개별론주 되베 계산라 너지 삼저 지다도 티실 꿀 현대매봐이 서버고 계산라이. 랑도 버시드베 냐라야 골라 메션 도도 전도나 조근전도 연전 중내기 준주소 계산라이. 신의 로도 내가 항동에 누구 나버려 좀 시시하네 수미실래야다 내가 상대고 계산라이. 싫으면 팔 친구이 저베스도 타버면에 타던 데죠. 그래서 미도에 싫어고 계산라이. 받아 뒤버죠. 친구.
And so from verse number 25 through to the end of verse number 30, these verses show the practices of the 6 perfections.
그래서 다 디샴디 다 진보 수준 서버전 당하는 남이 변화 진보를 성생기 진보 최지 진보 민지배 진보 야 그거를 참배지 보세요 소아요 그래 사당하는 변화 지기 기견을 내가 전에 지금 밀이야 지다 로종 돼야지 가다 최지 진보 쳐요 그래 야 최스로도 인지비지 최게지게 막 매일 팬심 아니 럽지 돼야 돼 최지 말 다 지금 뭐 붙이버디 상승기지 마. 아니 지 지벌이 껴버려야. 다부터 테크놀로지도 저기 미강에 세약 전달이야. 다 테크놀로지 리모트로 사바. 즉 테크놀로지 사바로 군우들 느끼는 제베이나 다티 미지고 지벌이야 협수도 왔다. 좋아요. 사실은 인도산에 나도 니리니리 미진나로리야. 집에 잡는 차 먹고도 와. 다때네 수중이 잡는스라도 전주선배 수림도 쪼쪼 시안은 나봤던 랑도 이지dom이한테 쪼래 다디 니리시는 거 상당히 어렵다 나 도스리 다드네 마전에 다 세배냐네 다디 샴게 다디 신에다 항동 다디 신에 사야되다 지지게 다 나한테 로리야 미국 가와이네 그럼 미국 대간을 도스 즉 유르고 매네야 그 미국 다가간을 로도스 짐도 비게 따야지 너버지 도와 그 영이 나서도 띵지 샤워하다 로야 예버리 더르나리아 따고 신의 주사디 딘데기 로러 정신기 그게 미국에가나 도 산이 돼야지 여대고 숙철다네 유증부바 대야지 디 탑시디 조 찬시 대야리샤 참배 미진디 송 아니 시신기 미진디가라 내만에 내베걸리니 치외 파도 잼마제 어다 디디 셰버체니 아니 친구기 쩐다 자와 미베가라 로산이 다지다 kum주래 아니 가래가래 안되게 뭐시버들이요 패지 미진시간 로도 데르전에 추주 시스테도도 와 서고 겁나요 예비주래도 와 사진에 인도 어다 디기 신내주단 때 다디 토미기 슈나로다 세브샤요 아니 꿈림 슈나로 야고도 로베 까말실려 꿈림 나로 야고도가 도다 토미가다 그래 으터다 말 토마네 자모고 으터다 아니 토미기 슈나로다 이게 되시래샤 다가는 신기 다리 뭐 공업 슈나라 이게 되지 주제체 내가 상도가 뭐 돈이 거야 질 상도를야 직대별 상도다 직대별 상도 직대별 상도 써야 돼 시라가 나머지 상도 거야들이 디 모디고도 투모리 감숨, 쌓고 사말에, 그봐? 전에 도시다 가다 지 삼된 숙미기 띵이들어야 돼. 저기 시라가 나바쟁다 상동 공야디 지대면 상동 써야지. 다지는 동리 공야디 지대는 대면 상동 써야지. 어다데 조조도 금지 동리 공야디 숨샤 숨겨야래. 직접시디.
And so, in connection with the earlier verses, verse number 25 to 29, what when we would show the six perfections. Of course, with regards to the practice of the generosity, for example, there is the practice of generosity in terms of giving dharma, giving spiritual instructions, and also giving fearlessness, or saving people from fearful states, and also there sometimes it's said giving love. And so these practices are mentioned in connection with the generosity. And so for teachers, for example, when you give instructions and to your students with a sense of caring and with wish to help them, then of course when you give your instructions or advice, it becomes a giving of dharma. And then of course with regard to giving material, there is also you can practice giving or generosity by giving material things to others. And then when it comes to using technology or developing technology and so forth, you can do so with a motivation to help others and other people and beings, to save them from dangers and so forth. When you do that, that also becomes the practice of giving, in terms of giving fearlessness. And so in our daily life, we can actually integrate these practices of generosity as best we could. And in connection with the Bodhisattva practice now, the primary practice of bodhisattvas is to do these practices within the understanding, without any kind of a selfish motive at all. And then when it comes to so that's about the practice of morality. So to restrain any kind of selfish motivation. And then with regards to the cultivation of single-pointed concentration, of course we can fix our mind on an object, whichever you choose. We can fix our mind on it and then cultivate single-pointed concentration. Now here, with regard to this concentration, the term concentration also comes in the subject or which is the called study of mind and mental factors. So in one category of mental factors, which is called the 5 ascertainments or ascertaining factors, one of them is said to be concentration, single-pointed concentration. So of course, even if we may not have a very, and so in
Buddhist psychology
in Buddhist psychology, and particularly in the text written by Master Arya Asanga, he mentions in the Abhidharma Samuccaya 51 categories of mental factors. And so and then within these 5 ascertaining mental factors, ascertaining mental factors ascertaining objects, one of them is this concentration. So even if we may not have a very powerful concentration whereby we're able to absorb ourselves in a single-pointedly on one object, I mean, we still have the potential to develop that kind of thing. And so we have the basis for, or the seed for that, and then what we need to do is put effort and strive to develop that kind of absorptive concentration as well. Now, in order to be able to do that, what is necessary are the showing mindfulness on the one hand, where you try to see fix your mind on one object and not to lose that focus. So being able to, you should try to show mindfulness so that you don't lose the focus. And in order to check whether you are actually losing your focus, and also whether any other obstacles or hindrances to developing that kind of absorptive concentration is happening or not, you use what is known as introspection. And so, or sometimes called vigilance within that state. When you fix your mind on the focus, you should also, from one corner of mind, see whether you are being distracted, or whether this mental excitement and mental laxity are also coming in your meditation or not, and then try to avoid them or overcome them when they come. And so in this way, you should develop this single-pointed concentration, the powerful single-pointed concentration with which you can fix your mind on the chosen focus without distraction. And I have some friends who are able to do that. They are able to stay on one focus single-pointedly for a certain period of time. And so with regard to the
there's that friend
text,
you see, 4 or 5 hours to fully concentrate without
distraction.
A distraction. It's reality. Is it possible? Actually, that person is American, not Indian, not Tibetan. I think at least 30, 40 years sort of practice. Now, you see, that person can concentrate 4 hours. Then some sort of indication of dissolution now begin to experience like that.
And so
I really very, very eager, you see, some sadhus, who spends years in Himalayan mountains, and particularly those sadhus who which remain in high altitude, there must be have a certain sort of practice of Chandalini and Kundalini. So they must have a certain deeper experiences. So far, not met. The last Mahakumbha Mela, say, I got an invitation. Then I think Mahakumbha Mela, and three times I had opportunity participate there. So recent Mahakumbha Mela, I got an invitation. I already accepted. But the day my flight, weather is very bad in Dharamsala. And then a few days postponed. Again, the day fixed, again very bad weather. So I think Shivaji not agree to allow me go there. No. Usually I telling the people, Lord Shivaji, his permanent residence is in Tibet, inside Tibet. So from that viewpoint, he is Tibetan God. Then Buddha come from India. So Tibetan Buddhist God is Buddha. So that's Indian. Millions of Hindus' God is Tibetan. We have some special, unique sort of connection. Isn't it? Like that. So this time, I sent a message. This time, I want to meet some of these sadhus who spend years in mountain. But then, my visit, you see, did not materialize like that. So really, we need, you see, because of the more sort of meeting and interact and exchange different experiences is very essential.
Yes.
Then
this is the last. In terms of cultivating this kind of absorption or single-pointed concentration, we have texts written by Indian masters like Arya Asanga, and also the text written by Master Kamala Shila, which is called the Bhavana Grama. And so these texts actually explain in great detail about the practice or the cultivation of the single-pointed concentration. And also, having done that, then what you develop also is this special insight. And within this insight meditation, there is an insight meditation pertaining to the worldly experience of insight, and then there is a transcendental experience of insight meditation. So worldly ones refer to meditations whereby, through which you lead into the higher realms of existence, such as within the three realms of existence, which are
Kama Dhatu, Rupa Dhatu, Arupa Dhatu. Three realms.
And then within these three realms also there's what are called as 9 levels. And so when you do meditation within this context of developing higher concentration, leading to a higher these planes of existence, then you are doing the meditation of called the insight within the worldly realm, whereas the transcendental realm or meditation on penetrative insight refers to meditation on emptiness.
Then, now last, Ranga Triba. Ranga Madana Triba Suji, Chimi Chesibe, Tiji Gundu Ranga Triba la, Tane Pong Jesa Lani. Nyuma Wangi Jesa Shandagi, Nebalanga Dani Nyamjuwe, Tekwa Chela Shube Kansagi, Nebamiba, Jesa Lani. Nigu Wangi, Pensu Zuyusha, Tesson Kombe, Chawa Nyamjuwe, Zashi Kimda, Jinda Kimna, Chakwa Pong Jesa Lani. Zumu Sigi, Shensim Chujushi, Gavesa Juju Nyamjuwe, Tiji Shenji Yidu Mwe, Tsuzu Pong Jesa Lani. Nyumu komna, nyembu dagawe, chanshi jibu, nyembu chunsu chaso nyumu tangbu jemata muzu cheba jesa lalai. Dona kangdu cholam jishiyang, rangi semji negu jindashi, gyundu chanda shishin denbayi, shendu chuba jesa lalai. Da di yagduwa shushudi. Dona kangdu cholam jishiyang, rangi semji negu jindashi, gyundu chanda shishin denbayi, shendu chuba jesa lalai. This letter.
And so verses 31 to 36. And so in verse number 36, it says, in brief, whatever you are doing, ask yourself, what's the state of my mind? With constant mindfulness and mental alertness, accomplish others' good. This is the practice of a bodhisattva.
자저저베 교환은 타연로 동에서 쿠스 나버다고 시르지 저중고 제설라니 누구 땡주나도 송베테 담반도 송게 전에 계산을 라니 숨주든 계산 남로 놈도 돈도 그 로드메지 잡으시면 개발개발도 좀 어찌도 너도 담배 송나 담배 칠 제설라니 주민라고 셈 현재 제설 저벌랍진 놈에 당제 띵바가베신 게다 만들어서 예배서 담반도 써버져 들려주면 개는 로그 전동 꾸주 전주 섬쇼 시대시에 다른 민에비 제네스 응교대도 총고쇼 제번디 랑션라 페베도 롱도 지고마 주보 토미지 무주진지 부도 자와고 now finished 37 verses 다 디두게 가자 나도 쓰기도 돼
나열 상말이요
now 8 verses now 다른 실제 통제로 20노블 내려버 통제집에서 다도 잡아서 가도수는 되니고는 신에서 초도 좀 저는 거좀 돌리면 다시 전도는 란싱에 비해서 주도 잡고 있는 레지스터다 잡아서 예버가 비지 다다시 사도 시골로서 경가랑 가나다가 봐서 로와서 신으면 신인도 봐도 도는 걸 팬데만 많이 사람도 대답 이제 또 보면 죽은 좀 해서 재미있는 거를 줘. Of course this 8 verses since many years I learned by heart. So whenever I have some sort of kasoda
leisure.
Yes, a time, and particularly when I wait at airport or something, wait, and I just recite this and think, very good. Otherwise, sometimes you feel impatience, and sometimes complain the pilot. So recite this, think that way, then no problem. So I think you also have the same experience. When you reach airport and announce 1 hour delay, or sometimes cancel, then shop downstairs. Quietly criticize like that. One time in Delhi, so suppose I think flight to Jammu, everybody in the plane already boarding were boarded. Then announce cancel because pilot not come. Like that. So in any way, this 8 verses, I don't know, the English contribution of that.
No,
If that's easy,
no.
then you see these things, you see worthwhile to learn by heart, and then occasionally recite and think. That's much more helpful than just a prayer. Pray to God, something mysterious, something mystery. Then these are just, you see, telling how to behave yourself day by day. Much sort of helpful. Clear. So now, finished our today's lesson. So perhaps good night. So now, no time question and answer, but if time permits, then tomorrow, some questions, okay. But at the same time, you see there is some what to call a tantric initiation. So that also is in need some explanation about whole structure of Tantrayana, like that. Finished.
We have Mr. Ashok Chopra, who will present a painting to you, Your Holiness.
Oh. Oh, very good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, very good. Thank you. What do you think? This of drawing my face more attractive, or my face more attractive? Thank you. Thank you very much.